Welcome, listeners, to Together with Feeding New York State. I'm Ryan Healy,
And I'm Alyssa Harrington.
and today we're excited to be joined by Pete Meyers, co-founder and president-director of the Tompkins County Workers Center. Pete, welcome to the program.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Absolutely, yeah. So we're excited to hear more about the work that you're doing. Can you tell us a little bit more about your work with the Tompkins County Workers Center?
Yeah, we started as an organization back in 2003. I had had experience as a mentor in a welfare to work program in Ithaca at Catholic Charities for 2 years, working with primarily single mothers being kicked off of welfare into work and invariably minimum wage jobs. So that actually there's something wrong with this. I had an activist organizer streak in me before I moved to Ithaca and actually found another labor activist who had been here for 20 years. And we joined forces and after 2 years decided to found then the Tompkins County Living Wage Coalition, which was entirely focused on living wages. But we quickly decided to add a workers' rights hotline component to that 6 months in, back in May of 2003. And that's actually continued with our work from 2003 until this very day. And we're getting calls all the time. We have to keep it very local because there'd be too many calls beyond what we could possibly handle. So that's very active. And we actually encourage workers, whether they're in unions or not, to contact us if they want to organize a union or if they want help with their union. And we lend a lot of community support to unions when they're standing up in public ways, such as a strike or such in their workplace.
Pete, that's super helpful context. Just to set the stage for our listeners, how do you go about defining a living wage and why is it important for food security?
So a living wage is what, kind of like the minimum amount that's needed to live in a particular area. For example, the living wage in Tompkins County might be different than the living wage in Portland County or Albany County. And so the living wage right now is $18.45 in Tompkins County, which includes Ithaca, but also the rural parts of Tompkins County. And that includes various categories such as rent, transportation, food, healthcare, savings, recreation, communication, tax, miscellaneous, and taxes. And so, for example, rent is the highest, pretty much going to be the highest category wherever one lives. And they tend to be kind of medium to low in terms of some of the estimates. For example, like food is only $283 a month. But I'm trying to imagine living on $283 a month. And this is for a single person, by the way. That's an important factor that I'm mentioning. It's not for a family. There are some living wage studies that kind of talk about families, constellations, but we've always done it by a single person.
Absolutely, and totally agree that even these numbers are on the low end. I'm also curious because I know you said recreation and communication is part of some of those factors for a living wage. Can you talk about why those are also important to consider just as much as things like rent and food?
Well, I think your average person in life could not possibly imagine living life without some amount of recreation. In other words, people are not just kind of like working all the time and don't have any recreational pursuits. So, like actually $137 a month for recreation is actually in some ways conservative.
Yeah.
Communication, obviously, like being able to have a cell phone, which also is about communicating with work and just ways to communicate with other people is absolutely necessary. The healthcare, for example, is ridiculously low. It's $203 a month. That's for both insurance and out of pocket. But that's actually presuming that somebody's in the marketplace, because oftentimes if you work for an employer, you're actually probably paying a lot more than that.
That's absolutely right, Pete. And so to connect sort of the work you're doing on labor organizing and living wages as well, could you tell us a little bit more about the impact of collective action and union organizing as well on fair pay?
Yeah, so we actually have that right now. In the past couple of months, we've had the experience in a very strong way with two specific unions in Tompkins County. One is the Teamsters Union, who represents the workers at Borg Warner plant. It's a plant with about 1,000 workers I think it's the auto supplies. They create auto supplies. It's a multinational everywhere in the world. And the actual plant has decided to move south of the border 700 jobs in about 3 years from now. And the workers decided to strike knowing that many of their jobs would be eliminated to get increased pay um, and a bonus. And so we actually were one of the main community supports to turning people out to their strike pickets um, in Lansing, New York, which is just outside of Ithaca. And it took about actually 3 weeks. And the workers were very successful in that, got a big increase in their pay, as well as a large bonus of $5,500 each. And the workers are very happy with that. And actually, just a month before that, all the service workers at Cornell University that are represented by the United Auto Workers 2,300, this is food service workers, building maintenance workers, custodians, also decided to go on strike. And so this was a lot of people. And after basically a month of pickets, which we were always on the ground with the workers, and they really appreciated us for that. They actually won their contract. Cornell gave up. You know, there was a picture of the president of Cornell University working the cafeteria line, and I thought, this is not going to last very long. It's a nice photo op for the president to be doing this, but and little, you know, it took a week longer, and the strike was over. And you know, like as far as wages go, you know, I mean, I think it helps unions to actually have higher minimum wages because they can bargain beyond that. The lower the wages, you're still bargaining most likely for not great wages, but it's better than what a statewide minimum wage is. And with ours presently at $15 an hour, which is better than many states in the South and the Midwest, you know, bargaining up from 15 is better. But, you know, we also like very much encourage unions to be involved with our campaigns, both at the statewide level to increase the minimum wage much higher, even higher than $20 an hour.
Absolutely, yeah. And I mean, awesome work. Congratulations on all of the wins that you had around both of those. And I'm curious, so you're talking about this collective action and how it kind of like started small but grew. How do workers get involved? Is that part of your work? And what are some of the strategies to have that collective action?
And so, for example, we have this, especially right now with increasing the local minimum wage, we're actually part of a statewide coalition called Raise Up New York, and they have a Wage Warriors program. So we've actually gotten 5 workers involved with the Wage Warriors program, and they actually get a stipend for doing that. And it's about, you know, advocating both on the local level. In our case, the local level is especially important because of our campaign to increase the local minimum wage in Tompkins County. They're also going to be able to like kind of talk to people on a statewide level as well when that lobbying happens at the statewide level.
So shifting gears a little bit, Pete, tell us more about your living wage certification program, and have similar certification programs developed in other parts of the country.
Yeah, so we were actually the first organization in the country to start a living wage employer certification program. That's obviously where we certify employers as being living wage or not. And it's predicated upon what the actual living wage has been estimated for. And being that it's $18.45 right now, or $38,373 a year based on a full-time week of 40 hours a week. That's what that is based upon. So it's $18.45 an hour. As a matter of fact, we have good information that the living wage in Tompkins County is going to increase to around $24.50 in February of this coming year. And really the reasons for that increase is because of the cost of housing is always the most expensive cost that someone has in their budget. And that's actually been skyrocketing locally in Ithaca because of gentrification, which, you know, basically, I'm not sure how one defines gentrification, but it's basically the increase, you know, more money comes into the area and they're looking to buy and build new housing. The amount of new housing being built in apartment complexes is just astounding in Tompkins County. And that's actually really raising what the living wage would be, because for every category we have rent, transportation, food, it's kind of like a conglomeration of what the kind of the average cost of these given items is in a given locale.
Yeah, well, thank you. And I appreciate hearing again, like there's so many factors, including gentrification, that make it so important for us to raise that minimum wage. And so going back to the certification program, how do organizations get involved to be certified? And what does that process look like as the wage continues to increase?
So, for example, in Tompkins County, because we actually only the only living wage employer program north of Virginia. Um, and so they would actually go to our website, TC Workers Center, TC as in Tompkins County, tcworkerscenter.org. And then there's a toolbar at the top that says living wage, and then you can click on that and see about the living wage employer program. There's an application for employers to apply, and then there's the criteria by which they apply. So when this wage was raised, the living wage was raised 1845 November a year ago, and that actually employers get to the end of this year to catch up. The new living wage in February 2025, employers will have till December of 2025 to catch up.
That's helpful, Pete, and want to applaud your efforts, really playing a leadership role nationally on living wage certifications. Shifting gears a little bit to New York State and some statewide efforts, and sort of providing some grounding for our listeners. Could you tell us a little bit more about home rule as well as efforts to enable New York municipalities to raise their own minimum wages?
Yeah, so home rule is not an attorney, so this is not going to be legalese at all. There are certain things in the state of New York that counties or locales can have home rule around, but that's not true for everything. And so, like, for example, like cutting across political spectrums, different sides have different reasons for wanting home rule. And I think there's a growing support for, home rule can cover many different things, not just wages. But right now, there is no home rule law either preempting home rule around raising local wages or basically granting locales such as Tompkins County to raise the minimum wage. To take one example, home rule can be around so many different things. We're looking to get home rule, but the strategy that we're using at present time is to get legislation passed at the Tompkins County level to increase our local minimum wage higher than the present state minimum wage of $15 an hour. And we actually took that to county legislature in August of this year. And through a very contentious meeting, the legislators decided to support by an 11-3 margin a $50,000 study to kind of gather community input from workers, from employers, from the larger community about how they felt about increasing the minimum wage and what people would want it increased to.
That's awesome. Yeah. And again, like, really appreciate the work that you guys are doing to push for it. And so I'm curious for other counties who may be interested in, doing a similar thing, what advice might you have for them for getting started?
Well, both Tompkins County and there's a big effort going on in Rochester right now, both happening at the same time. I would suggest somebody in another county could certainly contact either myself at the Tompkins County Workers Center, Pete at tcworkerscenter.org, or there's a person in Rochester now, Roxanne Siaka, who is doing that campaign. I don't know if Roxanna's email at this point, but those two locales, one is we're a rural county, and obviously Rochester is an urban area, so they're two very different kinds of locales, if you will. But we're actually working very closely together.
That's helpful, Pete. So what can New York State do to guarantee living wages for all workers while also allowing cities, municipalities to adopt a higher minimum wage as needed?
Well, at the local level, answering your question with the latter part first, basically, communicating with your state assembly person, with your state senator, with the governor to encourage home rule to be permissible for locales to do with regards to raising local minimum wages. And, really, actually writing letters to the editor, opinion pieces seems to make a lot of good sense too. I would say, and talk to other workers in your workplace. And it's kind of like if workers in another part of the state hear this podcast, they're certainly welcome to contact us, the Tompkins County Workers Center, and we can put you in touch with the appropriate local people to be in touch with. There hasn't not been a lot of activity on the ground from what I've seen in recent years with regards to raising wages, but I think the statewide campaign has encouraged some action to take place.
One question, this is an important last question we have. So what's one call to action you have for our listeners?
Definitely communicating with your assembly person, your state senator, the governor about increasing the statewide minimum wage, certainly. And if you have an interest in finding out more about what you might need to do at a local level, that would actually be great as well. And we could certainly plug you in. We could certainly offer you some moral and actual logistical support about how to do that and who to talk to. So, feel free to contact the Tompkins County Workers Center on that.
That's helpful, Pete. And you heard it here, listeners. One other thing, too, for employers, I want to give a quick shout out to Food Bank of the Southern Tier, one of our partners, one of our partner food banks. They were a living wage certified employer. So employers also make sure to do your part and pay your workers a living wage. Pete Meyers, co-founder and president director of the Tompkins County Workers Center. Thank you for joining us today. And remember, listeners, together we can end hunger and poverty here in New York State. Thanks.